All right, beautiful. So, welcome, Jason. Welcome, members of the Mastering Masculinity community. This is an exciting conversation that's going to be coming your way, guys. It's actually our first in our series that we're going to be launching here in the Mastering Masculinity community called Superpower Showcase. So, we get to showcase a man who is living on purpose and stepping into his leadership, living his mission, and on his path. So, any members that are out there, Jason Thomas is going to be our first member today, but any members out there where this resonates for you, I know a lot of you guys have superpowers and you are walking the path and purpose and mission. This is an invitation. We'll start there to any man to follow Jason's lead to request some space and place and time to share your journey, share your walk with the brothers inside of this community for the intention of inspiration, to inspire one another to know that it's possible to lean into our superpowers and lean into our gifts. So with that, I'll go over your bio here, Jason, a little bit, just so people can get to know who you are, and feel free to fill in the gaps when I'm done. For me, it's like your superpower is permaculture and community. Those are the two words that are coming from me. So the podcast Regeneration Nation, you've been running that for, I think, 9 years now, right? Somewhere in there?
No, the podcast 3 years.
3 years, cool. So yeah, so it's a passion of yours to really share your gifts already and inside of that podcast and share your permaculture gifts. And I know we've chatted a lot about community projects and really linking up permaculture communities, sharing your gifts, your experiences with people that are in that regeneration and permaculture world. And I know we'll dive deep on community communications and structures and anywhere in the world. I know you're down here in Costa Rica, as am I, to really bridge people that aren't from Costa Rica with the people here in Costa Rica in a harmonious way to have everybody win and excel and thrive in their lives. So those are the two veins that I'll pull from your bio, and we'll dive in, brother. But first question that I like to ask, and coming into this, is what inspired you to get into the path and the mission that you're on? What was that sort of key moment that sparked it? And you're like, okay, this is me. This is my authentic mission and purpose going forward. Just to inspire men of like that experience of that knowing of like, okay, this is who I am. That's the first question that I'd love to explore with you.
Wow. Okay. So I, I certainly can't say that there was a key moment. I have, I've been walking the path of unfolding for 25 years or so. I grew up the standard American diet and lifestyle in Michigan. I moved out to Arizona and I started meeting people into meditation and raw foods and holistic living. And I changed my life a lot when I was 22 and just embracing wellness. And after a pretty deep dive into that for about a year and a half there, I decided I just didn't want society anymore. I was, 22. I had just started repairing my body and my mind, and I learned about the ills of the world and the global families and all the conspiracies and all this other business, and just how the world's set up to lie to people in conventional institutional ways. And so I rebelled, as a lot of young people do, and maybe more. I got rid of everything I owned and walked out into the desert and spent 6 years vagabonding around North America. And during that time, I visited a lot of intentional communities and permaculture farms and unique places. And I lived many different ways over those times. And really just self-discovery. I had nowhere to go but forward. And I carried everything I was going to need for the rest of my life in my backpack for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, yeah, I unlearned so much about conventional living and had a lot of rebellion and taboos and pushed things away and had to also resolve those things too, to come back to my center. The pendulum starts at one side, and then we're like, oh my God, this is not balance. And then we swing our pendulum all the way to the other side and we get super rebel sometimes. And then we're like, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't actually entirely serve. So then, the journey takes us back and forth till we find our middle path. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that process ever really ends, but I feel like I'm in a bit more of my middle path these days. So after those 6 years, I swung the other side. I was like, I want to be ambitious. I want to work with other people. I don't want to just vagabond and live off the kindness of others and be of service and have my needs taken care of. I want to build big art and do things. So I moved to Minnesota, ran with a festival crew there for a few years, and then was just like, okay, I'm done with the cold, flat city. And my partner at the time and she had a couple kids that we didn't want to raise in the States. And so we bought a veggie oil school bus. Well, we bought a school bus and did a veggie oil RV conversion and threw the kids and whatever else we could fit in it. And I'd been in love with the tropics. I'd lived in Hawaii for several of those years. And so we started heading south looking for a new place to live. And we came to Costa Rica. She actually was a permaculture teacher. I was a road warrior. I knew how to do that part. I'd lived on a lot of permaculture farms, and so we combined our experience and bought a farm down here and raised the kids and hosted hundreds of people from around the world. We were originally looking for community, and like so many other people, we got impatient, and we instead of just renting for a while and investigating more and more places, we just bought our own farm and started from scratch and did our own thing, expecting all the friends that said they were going to come do it with us would come, and they didn't. And so we ended up doing it by ourselves, and school of hard knocks. And it's one thing to visit a lot of places and learn how to do it, but then when you're responsible for everything, you're like, oh my God, I didn't know what I didn't know. And and so that's how I got to Costa Rica and really got into permaculture. We were teaching permaculture design courses. We were building community with even just the volunteers and long-term staff members that stayed with us over the years. And after some years, we decided that freestyling it wasn't working for us. So we got serious about applying permaculture design principles and method to our business, to our home life, to our community structure. And we ended up writing some really great documents, a community living agreements document, a shareholder members agreements document. And we took what we'd learned in our experimentation phase and distilled that using the design method and the principles to get honest that actually many of our ideals weren't working. Mm-hmm. And so we created these documents and created a better program. And we rocked that for a few more years until we went to the States, because my youngest son, who was born here, has a developmental disability, or he has a chromosome abnormality. So he doesn't speak, and we didn't know what was going on. And we left our farm and we went back to the States for a few years to see what his needs were and what we could do for him therapy wise. And after a few more years in a cold, flat city, I was like, I'm ready to go home. And I came back down here at a little bit before the pandemic hit, the end of 2019, and stayed here through the pandemic, fixing up an atrophied farm and trying to redesign again this community that didn't quite work out, and trying to redesign it and make it into something new until a couple and a half years later, I determined that my co-founder and her fiance were not behind my new mission. And so I left. And through the course of that, I started, like I said, a few years ago, the Sharing Insights podcast, which when I left my farm, I kind of put to the wayside. And after getting into some community resilience organizations around the area, I rebranded to Regeneration Nation Costa Rica, and really decided that while I really want to help these like eco farms, which has kind of been my passion through my life with the years on the road, and then having my own permaculture education center and seeing over my 14 years here, like so many of these projects start and just winging it and going for it, and the greater statistic of them not making it. I decided like I really want to make it my mission to take my experience and my failures and my mess and turn it into my message, right? And so I've been compiling a lot of information from these people I've been interviewing and people that I haven't been recording interviews with. I have been, but I haven't been publishing a lot of more of my conversations, and really distilling it into what's becoming clear is my work, which is using this permaculture design method to help both land-based and other regenerative entrepreneurs slow down and really assess their goals, their intentions, their ideals in the permaculture framework, and design their approach in a way that's taking everything into account. Because a lot of the permaculture projects out here, they apply permaculture to their farm, but not their business design and not their community design. And they just kind of linearly go for it. They take some techniques, some tactics, some ideas, and they just start implementing them. And then they're just like, oh my gosh, how does all this fit together? And so as I've been designing, using the permaculture design method to create an assessment, design, and implementation framework for regenerative entrepreneurs and communities, I have been just like blowing, like almost crying inside. Like, why didn't we do this? Why didn't I do this when I started my podcast? Well, I was like thinking, how did I do this again? I started my podcast and then even rebranded my podcast without doing this process. And I'm finding myself again, like, I got to stop doing this, and I got to help other people to stop just going for it without taking everything into consideration, because we have too much ambition and dreams and resources going into things that are fizzling out. And so yeah, that's my mission right now, is to encourage people to slow down, go through the process, put everything in perspective, stack functions, make a better design so that the resources that go into implementation are fruitful. And anyhow, that's as condensed a version I think I can give you right now.
Perfect. Mic drop. We're done. Yeah. So many nuggets in there, bro. And in your journey, like the reflection of life lessons. And I want to kind of, there's so many threads to go down here. The first one, and really going back to intention of this community, is what I heard is like following your heart for what was in alignment for you. So it's like slowing down to be like, okay, it's time for me to go be a vagabond for a few years, 6 years, and backpack and get the message and find yourself. And I feel that's a huge gap for a lot of the men in the community, is like they haven't taken the time to slow down and give themselves that grace. Even if it's a weekend a month or a day a month, there's like so many men that we see in families and businesses, and it's like this go, 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 go. And all of a sudden we're years down the road and it's like, oh, well, my whole life is misaligned right now. Like I haven't made a conscious choice from my heart of like, this is what I require right now. This is what I want to go experience right now. Not only for myself, but I heard there's so much gold in there for you to show up powerfully as a father, as a leader, as your most powerful version of yourself, and deciding that this is how I want to live my life. Enrolling your partner at the time. It's like, hey, we're going to get the bus and go south. It's like that. I feel that's a massive piece that we can go down for a lot of men watching. It's like, and a lot of conversations that we have, it's like that, almost that courage to trust ourselves for what we truly want and desire, and then the courage to then act. So just curious on, if you had to share with the men right now, what would you suggest to them inside of that process, and what worked for you to inspire you to take those actions and honor yourself to move towards whatever was in alignment? Like maybe share a little bit more about that process, like sitting with it, making the decisions, like feeling into it a little bit. Let's take a couple minutes there, and then we've got about 3 other threads that we can go down after that I heard there too. A lot of integrity, slow down, structures, like really timing out in life for like a rebuild. But yeah, let's go down this one first.
I think for one, it's important that, again, there's the ideal of, slowing down and planning and really taking everything into consideration. And again, it's one side of the pendulum.
Mm.
And then there's also the fire of life, the impulse, the jump on in, the imperfect action,
Mhm.
which is also a valuable part of the movie. And
Mhm.
because we can overanalyze and get stagnant in that as well. So I think the advice is to allow the pendulum to swing and to honor that as being the process of the middle path. Um, and to keeping that in mind, I think that's really a piece there, is that if we can be aware that we need all those seasons, that balance is not a stagnant thing. It's a it's holding all things in perspective and the entire process in perspective. That yes, when we feel the impulse, it's really valuable to have counsel, to have a coach
Mhm.
or a consultant or a friend that you can confide in, or a family member. Be like, I feel really impulsed to do this. And it's so exciting that I actually need someone to like bounce this off with. We need a sounding board. If we're
Mhm.
if we're being impulsive in the vacuum of our own perception, that could be less ideal,
Mhm.
right? So having that piece is really, and if you don't have someone to confide in, like really before making impulsive action, especially if it's a big decision,
Mhm.
it's worth asking someone who's already made that impulsive decision.
Mhm.
Like for me,
Mhm.
when I when I was at the movie theater and I was 22 and I saw the movie Instinct and with Cuba Gooding Jr. and uh forget his name, but it was based on the book of Ishmael.
Mhm.
And this character, uh he had the audacity. He was a guerrilla scientist, and he had the audacity to walk away from his, not only his society, but humanity, like identification with being human. And he walked out into the natural world. And then he came back, and in the movie, he's describing like the in the book Ishmael, the story of the givers and the takers. And like I realized I was reorienting my world to being a giver, and just someone who leaves the world, or the leavers and the takers. I was wanting to walk a simple way, but I was living in this extractive society. And like I freaked out. I left the movie theater. I climbed a tree. I sat there for half an hour watching cars zoom by, finally calmed my nervous system enough to get in my car, and I couldn't go home. I drove up to Sedona, Arizona,
Mhm.
spent the night sleeping on the rocks, and then went to the farmer's market looking for somebody, some wise person. And the breadcrumbs left me to find some guy named Ed the Waving Saint on the side of the road as I was leaving town. And I was like, oh my God, someone said I would find you, and here you are. Can I talk? And he told me the story about when he walked away from
Mhm.
his family and his society. So I had that validation that really anchored, like, actually this is okay, and that there is a path ahead. Same way when I wanted to come back into society and be part of the 21st century business world, because my efforts at the farm were less than great. Like we did all these great programs that people didn't show up to. We didn't market it good. We were anti-marketing, anti-business, anti-internet, and all of this.
Mhm.
And so I was like, oh my gosh, I need someone to teach me how to embrace what I'd been pushing away all these years. Right. And so I had, again, that guidance to help guide me toward this, because trying to do it on my own without that guidance, without that reflection and feedback loop, wasn't working. And I was
Mhm.
still stuck. So honoring that when you feel your pendulum swinging and your impulse to do something, really check in with somebody who is where you want to be. Knowing that you can go anywhere you want, but having that mentorship is immensely valuable
Hmm.
in that process of making big lifetime shifts. Checking in the reasons why not to do it is a challenging process, but like if it's fear of the unknown, forget that, dude.
Hmm.
We are navigating the mystery. There's
Hmm.
no way to know what's around every next bend.
Hmm.
And really, no matter how much we fool ourselves into thinking that we got it all figured out, we're really keeping our head above water and trying to navigate each next turn. So, as much as people try to cling on to the known, it's important to recognize that the unknown happens to everybody, and don't be afraid of it because it doesn't kill us most of the time.
Yeah.
Even when it puts us into poverty and desperation and desolation, learning how to live in that pain is a gift.
Hmm.
That's the Stoic teachings. And Stoicism teaches us to, really embrace hardship when we can intentionally as a practice so that when it hits us, it doesn't consume us.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, if you're afraid of the unknown, but you're in a place where you can go there and you're in a good way and you feel called to it, don't be afraid to die. Don't be afraid to be consumed by the unknown, because getting good at that is the path of living a regenerative life.
Hmm.
Because we can come back out of that. We can rise up like the phoenix from the fire, not knowing what that's going to look like. I don't know. I almost forget the question now, but
Yeah.
those are the
Oh,
first
brother.
couple
Yeah.
things that come to me.
Yeah. So much to unpack there. And yeah, so much gold coming through this conversation. So acknowledging all of that really heard in like that for some of the men watching, it's like that first inspired action or inspired impulse to take action. It's like, yeah, follow that, but follow it from a space of, and this is a conversation that I bring in with a lot of the men that I work with and we talk to, is it's the ask the question who first, not how. Because often it's like inspired action, and your inspired action, oh, I want to go do permaculture, but I don't know shit about permaculture. There's is like diving into something and not knowing the how, and like just, yeah, there's like a lot of greatness in the mess and learning by mistakes and failing forward. But it's like, how much more efficient can that decision be? Where it's like, okay, great, I want to learn that skill. I want to understand what's next. It's like asking the question, who first? Who's done it? Who's failed at it?
Mm.
Who's succeeded at it? Who's experienced it? And focus on that who first. It's like, where can I find that guidance, that mentorship, that information that's going to help me make an informed decision, especially if it's like I'm going to go out on a limb and this is something that could impact my family and could impact my whole life. These big decisions, like you said, it's like, who's doing it? And that was a big part of like me moving to Costa Rica as well too. It's like, who's there? Just meeting people that have been here for many years. How do the things work? It's like, okay, I understand. And there's challenging things that are different from North America here. Things take longer. There's like there's all these different ways to, it's like a whole nother way of being down here versus like back in North America. It's like understanding that, and does that resonate with you? Because so many people come to this country and within 6 months they're out. It's like they
Mhm.
haven't sat with the who's. It's like they get here and it's like
Mhm.
they try to figure out the how, and then they're gone because they didn't actually sit with like, does this resonate with me? Does it align with me to make this move? So that's such a powerful um example for sure. And then the other piece inside of that too, um that I really got with that too, is the where am I going with this thread here? The who, the not how. And what was it? What was the second part of that
I can add
conversation?
to that.
Yeah, please.
I'll say with the who, I remember because I'm right now I'm designing a couple of mastermind groups for landowners of different types to come together and support each other as a collective in growing and fortifying what they're doing. And so, and I'm remembering the just this morning, I remember so clearly when I first got my farm and I started reaching out to like other landowners I knew, and I was just like, hey, can we do like a work party exchange where, we create a network where every other weekend we all go to somebody else's farm and do a collective gathering. And like that didn't really take off. And again, this was 14 years ago. It was the internet, and coordinating things like this was a little trickier, and people didn't have so much communication, even phone signal in some places. And then I found myself calling the same bro a bunch of times, asking him all the questions, talking about the who, having additional who's when you do take
Mm,
the dive and you are invested in something, like
mm,
really expanding your network and getting more who's on board with
mm,
places that you can ask. Because sitting in like your own vacuum again of circular thought and not knowing, it's not regenerative.
mm,
It's not healing for the planet and the people and the next 7 generations to stagnate yourself by being shy to ask other
mm.
people.
Yeah.
So that's something, and I fall into it myself sometimes where I'm like, oh, I really don't know, and I'm shy to ask somebody to just help me answer a question, and I got to get over that.
Yeah.
What I would add to the who is the why. When I do events or when I work with people, before we really get going, there's an exercise I do, the 7 layers deep of why, 7 layers why, like asking yourself
Mm,
why you want to do something. Everybody can say like why you
mm,
want to do something, but ask yourself again, like, why is that important to me? And
mm,
then why is that important to me? And
mm,
then why is that important to me? You got to ask a bunch of times to really uncover. And this is insanely important because when you do this, we often say, this is important to me, so that's why I'm doing this thing. But if you keep asking yourself, you get to the root of the real why, you can actually uncover a way to get your root need met without doing the big grandiose thing that set you on the question.
mm,
And that is super
mm,
important because our first impression of how we can manifest our why by doing something massive, like starting a big organization, like, you and I have done,
mm,
like, and then learning all the steps that are required to actually do the whole organization piece
mm,
just to get like the root why, when we
mm,
could have actually done the root why with just a simple little effort and been satisfied,
mm,
really, like
mm,
personally, when it comes down to the root of it, been satisfied by doing a little thing. If we realize that that little thing is all we really needed to satisfy,
mm.
we didn't need to do all the other layers of why to get that need met. That's a really important part of the design process, the assessment process for me. So besides
Mhm.
who, why, and oh, and I had another piece there, but go ahead. That's what I wanted to add to the who is
Yeah.
yeah, just really not hesitating and ask yourself deeply why. Oh, the last piece I'll add to that with the why piece and the assessing of whether to do something or not when you're on the edge is something I picked up from Tim Ferriss. He said, we often do the pros and cons list of a decision, and
Mm,
he said that's actually too subjective. It's like pros and the cons, they don't really set up a strong base for making a responsible decision as much as the risks and benefits.
mm,
That's actually a more rooted way to make a grounded decision as to what you're going to do is a good idea or not. Because then you start getting into the more like the more practical real decision making factors of what are the risks of doing this and what are the benefits. And it brings into mind something in the consensus process. Consensus is really tough for some organizations, but then there's this word consentment that's come out of it, and it asks, is this a good enough idea to try, and is it safe enough to try?
mhm.
Right. So instead of like, we're going to all agree that this is the policy, like you can ask yourself, is it good enough for now? Is it safe enough to try? And that's again coming into this risk and benefit piece that you can use as an analysis factor.
Yeah. Love that, bro. Yeah. Such powerful distinction. And it's like any men that we work with as well too. It's like really getting to the why of anything. It's like, why are we actually, what's the intention? The word intention is coming through. It's like, what's the intention in every area of life, not only the projects that we're taking on, like what is the intention here? And I love that, the risks and benefit. What's the intention with my family? am making any decision, what are the risks and benefit with this new intention, with my business, with my career, with my faith, whatever it is, like what's the actual intention behind this, and that 7 layers of why, like what's the a true core value and intention that I'm bringing to anything in life. And I really acknowledge your process of like coming into a permaculture operation of like getting and doing that audit, but it's like taking that on in our life as men. It's like, oh, I'm going to do a full audit of the structures, the intentions, the why, the all of it, the who can support me in this. I want to reinvent this area of my life. Who's doing that? Who am I inspired to follow? Like who's another man that's living the path that I want to go down, and how can I ask the questions of someone that's already been down that path? And yeah, it's really what we bump up against too. And those are like the first questions with a lot of men in the community. It's like, well, are you inspired? And what's the intention of what you're doing right now? What's your intentions with your family this month? What's your intentions with anything in your life, your business, your career? It's like often there's no intention there. It's just like it's this reactive appeasement or something that's happened there. And that's when that resentment and anger and fatigue and frustration and all of this stuff comes up, where it's like, oh, we haven't slowed down to do a Jason audit, permaculture audit of my life. It's like, okay, well, what's aligned, what's misaligned, and then really taking those steps that we've so beautifully co-created today. It's like doing the audit, who can I talk to about this? Why am I doing it? And then acting from an inspired way that honors ourselves as men. It's like, if we're not honoring our true desires, then that's my biggest fear, is on my last breath on this this human experience. It's like, oh fuck, like, you know what, I didn't actually live the life that I desired to live. I kind of didn't have the courage to really go through that process that we just walked through and co-created. So that's the invitation for any man that's watching this is, yeah, grab the nuggets that have been coming through today, and take that full audit process on in our lives. And that's really what I'm hearing in this conversation today. So much beautiful gold and messages that came through. Anything else, brother? I know we had a couple of topics we wanted to get into. Is there anything you wanted to share about what's next for you? I want to give you some space for that. So what's next? What are you working on right now? An invitation for men to connect with you if they choose to connect with you as one of their who's. How can they find you? And we'll sign off after that. So I want to give you that space and platform to share.
All right. Well, I'll give you 2 things. Like we did have some topics, and I gave it some thought when I wrote down, and I'm going to just kind of read these off so they don't go to waste, because there were real messages that I'd like to share. One of them is specifically for men in Costa Rica or any foreign country. I'd encourage them to spend more time connecting with their neighbors and to learn about what's important to them and to open those doors of trust. It's something I see as a missing link for a lot of men and women that are doing these big projects here, that they're really they're doing it in isolation, often out of default, not necessarily because they don't want to connect, but because they're overwhelmed and stuff. But taking time to connect with our neighbors and build that trust is really an important it's a requirement, I feel, for these projects to be truly regenerative. With that, being an ambassador for compassionate masculinity by practicing thoughtfulness and mirroring it with other men has been a really beautiful thing for me and in my life, to to just emulate that. Like, we all have that compassionate masculinity in us, and I think some men are kind of shy to just boldly be it. And we need that. You don't have to be feminine about it necessarily. You can be masculine in your compassion. And I picked that up when I had a visitor recently, and I was showing him around Costa Rica, and I checked in with him about, bro, slow down on the roads. Like, that person's walking, their experience of having you fly by and kick dust up is not compassionate. It's not compassionate to flow by. You really it's a compassionate thing to do, to slow down when you're driving down by someone on a dirt road, slow enough that you could reach out the window and say, adios,
Mm,
before you speed down the road again. And like that, I found myself cueing him into little pieces like that about how to be a compassionate person in this society, in a loving, not, I wasn't wronging him in any way. I was just being a man, a brother about that. And he really appreciated that representation of being an ambassador that I mirrored
mm,
to him. And the last piece here is embracing opportunities to be charitable by mentoring young people who have heart and drive, but lack the resources and skills. Ask what dreams and ideas they have and find space to encourage or guide them toward them. And, both you
mm,
and I are doing consultation work, and people are hiring us to do that work, and that's super appropriate. And at the same time, I've got several young Tico men that have been coming to the men's music circles at my house
mm,
and other things that have, because I'm bilingual, they're really seeing me as someone who's making effort, and that I've opened
mm,
that trust. And now they're just like, how do I rise up? And I'm
mm,
like, bro, let's talk. Like, you ain't got to pay me. Like, let me find out what your passions are, and let me give you some advice, and let me take you a little bit under your wing, because that's, we're torchbearers.
mm,
You and I've gotten to where we've gotten because others have lit our torch.
mm,
And it's important for us to be able to get paid for our work so that we can continue doing the best work possible. And at the same time, we can't be limited by that. And when we find young people that don't have the means, but they're clearly the spark that's going to light other people's torches, I feel like I really want to invite people to look for those opportunities and to take a little responsibility for that, and
mm.
take some people under your wing, and guide them on the way, and like take on some, little Padawans on their
Yeah,
path.
bro.
And so those are the pieces that the messages I wanted to share. And as far as me and my work, Regeneration Nation Costa Rica is the name of my podcast. regenerationnation.cr.com, or at Regeneration Nation CR on all of the social media stuff is how you'd find me and connect and join the communities and groups and whatever. If you have a business or are starting a business and you want guidance in not just winging it and wasting a bunch of resources and time and enthusiasm on, like, you don't have to. I have a free assessment that I've just put together that you can answer a bunch of questions and learn from that. And if you want assistance with the design process before you start implementing, or to change what you're doing, contact me. I can share that with you. We can work together. I would jump on a free call with you and help look at your assessment, and just even without hiring me, be happy to look at your assessment together and just offer a little bit more, because I want people that are investing themselves into a regenerative future to succeed, because watching too many people not succeed is really breaking my heart, and it's hurting the movement. And yeah, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, beautiful, brother. Yeah, thank you for putting that in. And I want to echo the youth, bringing youth under the wing as well too. So definitely in the intention of that and lighting. I love that. And the example of lighting a torch. I know we've had our torch lit by other mentors, and I know I was on a completely different path. So if those torches weren't lit for myself, and I'm yeah, internally grateful for that. So anytime that we can pay it forward to the next generation, that's where the shifts happen. And I love that in especially we're in here, we're in Costa Rica and in these communities. If we can light more torches in these communities and let people know that there's other options and other ways to rise up and become leaders in their communities, it's like it lights up my heart of the ripple effect that can happen with that. So I invite everybody to heed Jason's advice and think of the ripple effect and what can happen if we put a hand out and invest some time in some youth in the next generation. There's so much that can come from that. And thanks for sharing where you're at, brother. And I invite any man to create Jason as one of your who's. He's a very knowledgeable and authentic man who's here to support. So with that, we'll sign off, brother. I appreciate you being our first guest in the Superpower Showcase, and we'll continue from here, brother. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Beautiful.
All right,
So happy
brother.
to be in community with you.
Yeah, much love, man. We'll see you soon.
Peace.
Ciao.